Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Ahad Hussain, and welcome to Season 4 of Titan Alumni Talks, a weekly podcast where we talk to alumni about their experiences at Cal State Fullerton. For this week's episode, we have Sabrina Valles, who is a marketing and event specialist based in China. She graduated in 2014 with a bachelor's in public relations. Listen as we talk about her move to China and her time at CSUF. You can catch these episodes live at 11 a.m. on Tuesdays at titanradio.org, or you can watch all past episodes on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/CSUF alumni. Thank you, Sabrina, for joining us on the podcast today.
No, thank you for having me.
So I know you had quite a bit of a journey from Cal State Fullerton and then also going to the Zhejiang University of Science and Tech.
So it's a long transition, but actually so I went to Cal State Fullerton from August of 2010 to about, I would say I graduated in May of 2014. And what was really interesting was I came to Cal State Fullerton not sure what I wanted to do. I actually came in as an undeclared major because I would always say, I'm undeclared because I don't know what I want to do with my life. I'm 18 years old. I have to make this big decision now. And I just didn't think it made sense for me at the time to make such a big decision about degrees and majors until I was a bit more sure of myself in terms of like what I like doing, what I hope to potentially turn into a job in the future. And so that's why it was really different for me, because I know a lot of people when I entered school, they came in, they declared themselves as different majors, but I actually watched quite a bit of them change their majors over time. Well, for me, I came in undeclared, and it actually gave me more of an opportunity to feel a sigh of relief as I was doing all of my general ed studies. And I think general ed was really where I was able to kind of discover what I liked and what I didn't like. And even throughout life, and this is not just in college, but even after college, and I think this is how I ended up where I ended up today, is it's always constantly discovering and rediscovering yourself and figuring out things. What do you like to do? And what do you hope to eventually turn into like valuable skills that you can do as a job. So I was at Cal State Fullerton. I was undeclared for the first 2 years, did all sorts of undergraduate um, undergraduate classes, all of the general ed got done. And then by the time I hit junior high school, I remember, or before junior year, I remember thinking like, okay, about majors and started learning more and diving more into the different majors. And I remember coming across the College of Communications. I remember coming across public relations and journalism and broadcast journalism and all the different majors offered by the communications college. And just thinking like, wow, all of these classes sound really cool. I've always liked, I thought like in high school, I always thought I wanted to help people. And so I thought, oh, maybe I'll do psychology. And this was like in high school. And I remember doing an AP psychology class and not really enjoying it back in high school. So what was interesting was when I did the College of Communications and started learning more about public relations, because public relations, like when you first hear about it, it's a very vague thing. And even today, like even to this day, you're always constantly explaining to people what you do. And I remember looking at it and thinking, wow, like this sounds something that I liked doing back in high school, because back in high school, I liked raising awareness about issues happening around the world. And I did a variety of like awareness projects. And I remember thinking back in high school, oh, I love bringing awareness about things. I love to educate people and bring awareness and put together these different campaigns and talk to people. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was doing one aspect of public relations. And then I come to college my junior year and thinking, wow, like I'm now putting together something I actually enjoyed doing from back when I was in high school, to telling these stories to a major in college. And I thought that was just a really cool moment. So from there, I ended up doing my college degree. I ended up like doing all the different classes, doing as many, like at the time, it was doing some internships. More towards my senior year, I did more internships, I would say. I guess like the point is that you don't really know what you want to do sometimes when you're 18 years old, and it's okay to change your mind. And I think it's a constant process of discovering and rediscovering yourself and thinking about your majors as instead of what do you want to be when you grow up, focus more on what do you like doing. Like, do you like to write? Do you like to film? Do you like to act? Do you like to um, make things, build things, solve? Do you like solving problems using science? Do you like math? And I think that's really the best way to find yourself in college, but also to find yourself like even after college and also just try things. Because sometimes you try something and you think you might like it, but you don't like it, and that's okay. Sometimes those accidents or what you might think are accidents are probably pivotal life moments that you don't necessarily think would be pivotal until you actually like hit 5 years or maybe a few years down the road and you realize like wow, this was actually a really pivotal life moment where I learned I didn't like something, but it led me to something else that I realized that I enjoyed more.
So you brought up a lot of great points, and one thing I'm curious about is how did you know college was right for you, especially since you were going in undeclared and you didn't really know what you wanted to do for like the first 2 years. So, what was going through your mind in high school, deciding that you wanted to go to a university instead of maybe taking up a trade or doing some freelance work on the side without needing a degree?
Well, to be honest, like I grew up in a family where it's all about you go to college. And I think like family influence played a big role because both my parents went to college, and but I will never forget how my dad would always tell me do something that you love. So really, like, I guess when it came, I guess like for trades, like I was never really interested in trades, to be honest.
So, going back on how you got into PR, I noticed you did a couple of clubs such as PRSSA and some work for CSUF Latin Communications, right? So, was that in the beginning of your first 2 years, or was that in the latter after you knew you were going to major in PR?
So my first 2 years in college, I was actually in Ballet Folklorico de CSUF. I'm a folklorico dancer. I'm Hispanic, I'm Mexican American. I'm like third, fourth, fifth generation, and I've been dancing since I was 5. So I saw they had a folklorico club, so I joined, and I was actually the PR officer for the club. So I was on the executive board my sophomore year. I was very involved in folklorico and like helping really shape the identity and probably some of the earlier years. And And it was, like, really cool, a really great experience because I think also, like, my folklorico experience and being, like, really heavily involved in my culture, I think also played a pivotal role in my public relations journey. Because I even my senior year of college, I actually helped plan a summit called the University Folklorico Summit with, one of our um, regional folklorico organization, basically covers California and even the U.S. And they plan festivals every year called Danzantes Unidos Festival. And what was interesting is like I always say like they kind of recruit. It was like kind of a way like they recruited me into the organization because actually one of my first professional experiences was with Danzantes Unidos, and it was all because of my involvement in Ballet Folklorico de CSUF and my helping plan the University Folklorico Summit and taking it in an approach of like, okay, this is where like it's not only an opportunity where we get to celebrate our culture, bring people together from different universities that have folklorico groups, but also it was also an opportunity like as a graduating senior, like, hey, this is a great opportunity and learning experience where you could do, you could basically create your own opportunities. I would say create your own opportunities to basically build the skill set for your resume as well. And actually, like, one of my first, like, even like opportunities after college was doing work with Danzantes Unidos and doing marketing for them and helping them in back when I was first starting out. And even to this day, like recently it's been harder because of COVID and where I'm at now in my life. But I've after college, I was working with them for years, helping them with their PR and marketing. And I continue to do so even with full-time jobs. So I would say like folklorico was, even you may think like, oh, like folklorico is just for fun. It's all about culture. I'm like, no, like also too, like I think folklorico helped play a pivotal role in just me being a communicator and me working in my industries and understanding like cultural relevancy and understanding how different markets are doing and how you like communicate with them and market to them. Because even now to this day, where I'm at, like that's so important. It's so important to understand how you communicate with different people. But so like folklorico played a huge role. Also, I would say Cal State Fullerton's Public Relations Student Society of America played a pivotal role. I was a fundraising director my senior year of college for that organization. I was a part of PRSSA for 2 years because I didn't know my degree at the time. So I joined as soon as I knew my degree. And I went to all of the meetings and took like vigorous notes, learned about internships, got some cool opportunities for them as well. And also like was played a big role because really college is about what you get out, like what you make out of it. So you can't expect to go into these clubs and be like, I'm going to get an internship. No, it doesn't work like that. Like you have to put in work too. If you put in work, people will vouch for you. And this is where your social capital comes in. So I have to say with the Latinos Communication Institute, I was there with them back when they were an initiative. So I was one of the first student assistants. Actually, I was the first student assistant and was very like, I was involved. It was my senior year when they started. And I remember like meeting the director at the time, and she was just amazing. And I just learned so much from her because she was one of these like very strong Latina women who's done so like very well in her career. And she also went through a variety of different career paths where she dabbled into different things, realized what she liked, and then ended up into education. And it was just really cool because from her, I learned a lot of things and knowledge that I wish that I knew back then. Like, for example, she would always say, like, she would always share with us, like, yeah, it's like really important to develop your skill sets. Like, to develop your skill set, it's important to figure out, like, putting together your skill set. So then you can basically at your current job, apply for your next job. So you always think about what's next when you're somewhere currently. Like what skills you want to build for the next step in your life and wherever that may be. And also like she just really taught us about networking and like how to develop an elevator pitch, because even like putting together an elevator pitch as a college student, it's like a very hard skill. And to go up and to talk to people, I think as a college student is very hard. And so like she was one of those people who was helping build that social capital. And I think like the program itself, the way it developed into today, like I think now like people are just building, like learning these skills because it's a work preparedness program. It's not a club, it's a work preparedness program. And I think what's really interesting about this work preparedness program is it's actually a very unique approach because it's truly preparing people for the workforce, but it's also really talking about diversity and also helping with like bringing like culturally competitive communicators into the workforce. And I think that's also something of note too, like just to being like competent in understanding that everybody has their own story, everybody comes from different backgrounds, and you have to also remove your own lens when you're communicating, like doing PR and marketing work. So like Latino Communications Institute now actually also played a pivotal role as well like all of the organizations played a pivotal role because I learned a lot of different things. But it's also at the end of the day, you can't just join a club and think I'm going to get something out of it. It's all about, you have to apply yourself and you have to do things and create your own opportunities and just put yourself out there, be willing to learn, to do things. And then from there, you're able to really, I feel, be able to have all the skill sets and things necessary to land your first internships and then later your first jobs, because getting your first job out of college is actually probably one of the hardest things. And a lot of people don't realize that, because I think like the first job is also very pivotal. So that's why like social capital is super important, because you need people who are advocating for you from the inside as well, and who can speak very well of you and your work to be able to help each other and lift you in. And I think that's why like alumni networks, and even with our Latino Communications Institute, like I'm still very connected with them, because like we all like help each other. We're all a very like great network of people, and we all want to help each other, and we still help each other even after we graduate. And we help the students who join even when they're students, and help them learn things that we wish we knew back when we were there. And even with like the other organizations, yeah, I'm still connected. PRSSA is actually how I ended up where I ended up now. And I'm still very connected. And I feel like Ballet Folklorico de CSUF helped play a pivotal role in starting my career too. Because if I didn't get those experiences, I wouldn't have landed like some of my first early internships in my earlier jobs. I also did work with a very large shopping center as well, and even working with some really cool like experiential clients as well. And those people, like those small businesses that were at the center. And it was just really powerful to me. I really enjoyed those experiences too, like doing those opportunities. And then I just felt like it was time for me to do something that I've always wanted to do. And this is where I also go back to Cal State Fullerton as well. I did a study abroad program for 1 month in Costa Rica back my junior to senior year. And it was about anthropology. And that's where my interest with like realizing how much I loved anthropology was, because I realized I've always loved hearing stories, learning about cultures and other people's cultures. And anthropology is that. I wish I was able to minor in it back when I was at Cal State Fullerton, but it was just to me, I just didn't feel like with where I was going with graduation. For me, I was just very grateful just to have the one experience and doing learning about anthropology. And that was like, I remember being abroad thinking in Costa Rica, wow, like this is something I would love to do one day. I would love to be abroad. Fast forward, I'm at the agency and I was like, I love my career, but I want to live abroad. And I told people even the year before, next year, I'm going to be living abroad. In 1 year from this time, I'm going to be living abroad. And then I saw somebody from PRSSA that posted about how he is teaching abroad at a kindergarten. And I thought, wow, that's so cool. He's teaching in China. That's such an awesome opportunity. I want to talk to him about it. Let's see what China teaching's about. I've always enjoyed mentoring. I enjoyed teaching. I've done a little bit and got to mentor students and got to teach them a bit back when I was working at the art school and at the art charter school. And like this would actually be a really cool thing. So I talked to him about it and thought, oh, might as well try it. Like, hey, it's a 2-year contract. What do you have to lose to go try it? And I could always come back after 2 years and I could continue my PR career because I love PR, right? I do. I still do. But then I decided to do it. I packed my bags and I said, okay, I'm living in China for 2 years. Moved to China and then realized I loved China and I loved living abroad, but I did not like teaching kindergarten. So I was able to apply a lot of like my communications and marketing experience into teaching a little bit, and was able to still do writing and help the school with some of their writing that they needed. because with English translations, it's very like to make like basically help with the grammar and just make it sound like make it flow. That's really like what I like to do when I write. And I realized there in China that I could actually enter marketing and enter in PR again. I didn't realize that I could until I got to China and felt like, wow, I don't have to just be an English teacher to live abroad. Like if you love teaching, I highly recommend teaching abroad. Highly recommend 100%. But instead I was like, to me, teaching kindergarten was not my thing. Maybe I might be better as a university professor. I think that might be my later calling in life. But actually, like I decided to go to a school in China for a year. So after I taught for a year, I decided to go study Mandarin at a university in Hangzhou, which is where I'm currently at now. And then after studying at the university for a year, I was applying for different jobs, like different like marketing, PR type jobs. And they were all like really cool, like positions I was applying for. And then this opportunity came up where I saw that I saw this like copywriter position. And I thought, oh, this copywriter position sounds really cool. And it was for this technology company that will outsource their employees to other companies. And they asked me like, oh, like, where do you live? And I said, oh, I live in Hangzhou. And they said, oh, there's an opportunity in Hangzhou. And I said, oh, I'd be really interested in applying for it. Like, what is this opportunity? I'd like to know more about it because I love Hangzhou. I love my city. And they said, oh, it's to work on AliExpress at Alibaba. And for those who don't know Alibaba or AliExpress, Alibaba is one of the largest companies in China. They are a tech company who owns a wide variety of very major influential e-commerce platforms here in China. And their global platform is AliExpress, which is very popular in Spain and France and pretty much Europe and also even like Korea, Japan. So they're everywhere. They can even ship to the US as well. And I thought, wow, like it would be such a really great opportunity if I can apply for this copywriter position. And if I get it, I get to work on AliExpress and work with Alibaba. And I was just like, wow, like this sounds so cool. And so I applied and I got it. And it's so cool because now like my whole career is now turning full circle because that event where we did the Chinese media event, I understood the culture better when I moved to China. And that was really cool to like go full circle to better understand like previous work experience. And then even one of my events I did was like a Lunar New Year event. And now I'm celebrating Chinese New Year every year, which is cool. Like to be in mainland. Of course, I want to one day go to somebody's home, like, and do like a really a Chinese New Year there. But one day, I hope to get invited to do that. And also, like what's really cool, like I said earlier about cultural competency, where like Latino, like being in like folklorico and learning about my culture and being part of the Latino Communications Institute. It was an initiative back then, but it's an institute now, which is so cool to see their progression. You have to learn about cultural competency and how you communicate with different audiences. And my job at at the company I'm working for and I'm doing work for, they're essentially my client in a way. It's like they're clients, but yeah, like what's really cool is we're doing like basically we have to write content and it's localization. They call it localization. While in the States, it's like multicultural marketing. And it's all about creating localized, relevant content and relevant stories to people around the world. So we work with writers from around the world who don't just translate, they localize the messaging so it's relevant to their audience. And it's really cool to come full circle because this was things that I was advocating for and pushing for back when I was in the States, especially when doing work with like the Hispanic communities. And it's just really cool to come full circle. Really cool to come full circle and to see like everything I've done since college is now like applying to my life now, and seeing how like previous experiences are applying to my career and my job now, which makes it like really a great place to be. And it just makes me excited, like to finally feel like, wow, like I've made it abroad, like that calling to come abroad, like that gut feeling that said, go, just do it. I'm now here. I just listened to my gut and I thought like, let's take a risk, let's take a chance. And let's see if I like it. I didn't like teaching kindergarten, but I loved my students. But I found my career path. I found my career path and I found my footing, and it's all about finding what you like to do and applying yourself and navigating through the spaces. So
This has kind of like shown the importance of sort of networking, especially at college when even though people around you might not think that they have a lot of resources or a lot of things to provide right away. And like you mentioned, you shouldn't go into a club or go into a network expecting something out of it. You should just go into it because you naturally enjoy it. And somewhere along the line, like you graduated in 2014, and I believe you moved to China in 2018. So it was many years
yes,
after you graduated, and you mentioned that it was someone from PRSSA who was a part or like working in China teaching a kindergarten. So just keeping those connections
yeah,
even after you graduate. It's not like you should go in during your college and then once you're done with university, leave that university completely behind. It's still good to keep those connections and still be involved. And one thing I want to bring up is you did participate in the D12 event and you hosted it. If you would like to give sort of like a background for students on why you did it, what you liked about it, and why more students should sign up for D12, which we host once a semester, so twice a year,
hmm.
basically.
So there's a bunch of things I can say about D12. So one thing, you never know where you end up, like where people end up. That's one thing. Two, I think you should always just keep good relationships with people and be nice to everybody. It doesn't matter who they are, just be nice, be friends, be friendly. You don't have to be their best friend, but you could still be nice and be good acquaintances. I think with that, like even there, that's like how I ended up in China. And also like even in China, like my the director of the Latino Communications Institute, she actually did her educational degree at Cal State Fullerton, and one of her classmates was from China. So actually, like I got to meet another Cal State alum in China during a time where I needed to feel like at home. And so like Cal State Fullerton did that for me too. And I think with D12, what makes D12 interesting is that students get to come and meet with professionals who want to help you. And I think like cuz back then when I was a student, I felt like, oh, like I'm really scared to like talk to these professionals. I don't want to come off as I want something from them. But really like these professionals, they just want to help you. They want to help you find your path, find your way, but also at the same time, you have to do groundwork as well. But I think with us, like we want to help you figure out, like help you find the path. And we'll help you find the path and we'll take time to help you find the path. But we also have to understand too that I think also there's also some barriers that may be hard to help people find their path. So I think that's where like the whole social capital comes in as well, and being able to like being an alumni and helping others, and there's just this expectation that you're going to help each other. And I think that's why like I think that's also like important as well, because you just want to help people succeed, and you never know like what could happen. It's more selfless. I think it's more of a selfless thing. And like I think students should go to D12 because I'm sure there are tons of different professionals that have a wide variety of different experiences that they may be able to connect with them on some certain level. Like, I think everybody has their own story, and everybody's story you can learn from. So I highly recommend D12. I highly recommend staying in touch with your alumni, even if it's through other networks. And even networks that necessarily you weren't involved in back when you were in school. I think being a part of alumni associations are probably like the best way to be a part of these networks, because I think like also with alumni associations, like you get to meet with people that you probably never really connected with, but also with people who were in the college like years before you were even in the college.
And you brought up a lot of great points. Like, for one, we do have over 300,000 CSUF alumni. So that just goes to show that we're not all living in Orange County after we graduate.
Yeah, I think joining clubs are so important, and I always tell people like join things you like to do, because you never know who you'll meet. Maybe you'll meet your best friend. I know people who've met like their significant others through these clubs. I've met some of my best friends who I am friends with to this day, and yeah, and these networks, like we're still meeting people. It's really cool. Still meeting people. I'm seeing people now like transition into their lives that I met after I graduated Cal State Fullerton, which has been pretty cool too.
Do you plan on staying in Hangzhou for a while, or do you plan to come back to the States, or do you plan to move abroad, maybe somewhere else in the future? Or are you sort of content where you're living right now?
Well, I love Hangzhou. And so I'll probably stay in Hangzhou for a bit, because I want to open the company here in Hangzhou. Hangzhou, with Alibaba being here, like there's a lot of opportunities for being an entrepreneur here, even as a foreigner.
And so before we end it off, I just had a couple questions about your complete move to China. Well, let's just start with the first one. What did you find most difficult about moving to a different country, especially one where you sort of had to learn a foreign language, especially because you didn't move to like the main city in China?
Well, I would say like, because I don't know if there's this like chart where it talks about culture shock, where you have this high and then you hit the low and then you like maybe hit the high again. And I remember hitting the low, and I remember like that being very tough because I felt so alone, and I felt like I didn't really have a lot of support. Like I was still very new to the country. It wasn't more like I wasn't tired of the customs or the people or the culture, the language. It was more just like feeling like I didn't have support and I just felt alone. And everybody experiences that. It's a very common thing. But like at the time when you're experiencing it, it's hard and it's tough. So that I would say was probably the most difficult, was that experiencing that low and understanding what that low meant.
Another question I had was, is there something that you've experienced in China that you kind of wish was here in the US, or something you didn't expect that you now really like over there?
So to answer that question, one thing I wish the US did that China does over here is a focus on learning other languages. I think around the world, people learn multiple languages when they're kids. While in the States, like I think even language education at an earlier age is hard to find and hard to come by. And if I were in the States again, doing life in the States all over again, I wish I learned other languages when I was a kid.
And one last question before we get into a bit of advice for students. I'm just wondering, and I feel like a lot of people are, is how are other countries dealing with the coronavirus?
So China actually took a different approach. And I think really the approach is different because of the society and the way the society is. So to kind of like, let me put that in perspective first, and then I can explain to you COVID and how China dealt with COVID. So the US is a very individualistic mentality, where it's all about like it's about the self. China, and I think a lot of the Asian countries out here, they are more about family over self or the community over self. So that's a very China mentality. It's all about putting others above self. So when the pandemic first hit, I remember I was traveling with a friend in China, and she came to visit me, and we went to Vietnam first, and then we saw the news of the lockdowns, and I'm like, well, let's go back. Let's see what's going on. And if we need to leave China, we will leave China. So we went to Beijing. She got to go see the Great Wall, which is, going to China, see the Great Wall is a very important thing. And then that's when we started hearing about all the lockdowns. So they started locking down. I would say the news came out, it was like mid-January of 2020. And then around, I would say it was like February or late January, early February, that's when they started going in lockdown. Then from there, we waited it out. And when I was in the Philippines was when I found out in Hangzhou, where I was living, my district was locked down. So they locked down my district where nobody could come in and out of my district. So I knew, like, in the Philippines, I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to be able to go back home for a bit. Luckily, my boyfriend was in Shenzhen at the time, which is a city south China, like right next to Hong Kong. And so I knew, like, okay, so I just need to get to him, and I need to do it soon, and I need to do it fast. Because you could only spend so much time, like, I think, outside of the country you're living in. And for me, like, I knew people who chose to stay outside, and I know people that decided we're like, no, we need to go back in and just like quarantine. So I came back in China February 6th. And I remember, like, the Philippines, like, before I entered my flight, they saw I had China history in my passport. They gave me a temperature check where they didn't give anybody else a temperature check. And I knew it was because I had China travel history in my passport. And then I remember, like, my flight got canceled 3 times from the Philippines because then they barred Hong Kong from coming to Philippines. And then they also barred Macau. I think they barred Macau too. I'm not sure. But I knew Taiwan, I was able to fly through Taiwan. So I flew through Taiwan, and then from Taiwan, I went to mainland China. And so Taiwan was just like, get there at night, fly that day kind of thing. Less than 24 hours. Then I got to Shenzhen, which is a city south of China next to Hong Kong. And from there, like, I remember, like, I was registering a higher fever for some reason. Like, for some reason, it was like slightly high. So they had me do a COVID test in the airport. So that was quite interesting. So I was with a bunch of people, and we did like a blood test and like the swab, like a cotton swab in the back in your throat in the airport. And everybody was wearing masks. It was all like masks everywhere. Then you see the people in the suits in the airport. And it was quite interesting because it was like, oh my gosh, like, wow, like, this is insane. And I remember going to my boyfriend's compounds in Shenzhen, and they basically did not allow us to leave the compound, but we were able to leave the room because the room was like super tiny. So imagine quarantining for a month, and you could leave the room, but the room is like small. It only fits really a bed, a tiny kitchen, and it's not like in US standards, you can't call it a kitchen. It's literally a little shelf, and then you have your hot plate, and maybe you have your rice cooker, and then a little bathroom, and the bathroom had like a shower that was like over the bathroom, super small. People in the US would probably think, wow, you're crazy. Like, this is where you're quarantining at for a month. China's a very delivery centric place already. So it was just really like operation as normal. Like, the delivery people, I think, had more work. They were more like the frontline workers where they had more work. They had to do all these deliveries for food, for people bought food or people bought groceries. So it was already like China's infrastructure was already kind of set up, I think. And then eventually, like a few weeks later, we were able to go outside the complex, and we'd go to the mall, and they wouldn't allow us to sit inside the restaurants and things. Like, people would say, like, even those living in Shanghai, even where we were, I've never seen the streets like so empty. Like, everywhere was empty. But then March came, and that was when we came back to Hangzhou, and we pretty much stayed home, but we were still able to do things. So like by March, like restaurants were opening with like the sanitizers, and then we could eat in restaurants finally, like in March. And then in April, I would say most things were up and running and operating. We were just wearing masks Like eventually, like everybody was brought into work, like slowly but surely people were brought into work. And then everybody was wearing masks, like pretty much I would say from like February to about April. And then I would say around April, like mask restrictions started getting loosened, and then they would loosen them depending on where you're at. So like there was a time like at the mall where they used to do temperature checks like individual, and then they got the screens that do like the monitoring and do temperature checks that way. But pretty much like we've been living normally, I feel, since March, April of last year. So like pretty much a year ago. But we were still wearing our mask in the subways, public transportation, and if you had to fly flights. Um, but China is also a very mask wearing society. So like I've been having a little cold lately, and like now what I do, I think because I've been living in China for so long and things, and I'm at work and I'm sick, I put a mask on. And that's like what you do. Like if you're sick and you're feeling sick, you put your mask on, and because you don't want to get others sick. And that's just the mentality of the people. So now like I do that too at work. If I'm feeling sick, I put a mask on and I'm able to, and I just wear my mask. And it's all about people over self kind of mentality. And I think that's why like the response, like COVID cases went down so quickly in China, was because of the fact that the people value people over self. They wore their masks, no questions asked. Like if somebody goes up to you and says, "Hey, put your mask back on," they do it. So it's very like, it's just a different mentality, I guess is the best way to put it. And I guess like now April 1st was when my city is now allowing anybody over the age of 18 and foreigners to get COVID vaccines. So for us, for COVID vaccines and the cost, if you pay into the social insurance, which is basically like a pension, health, unemployment, um, you could get your vaccine for free, both doses. But if you don't pay, it's 100 kwai, which I think is around like 14, 15 US dollars per dose. So I think like I'll actually get mine for free because I pay into social insurance every month with my company. So that's gonna be cool. And so yeah, and then yeah, schools opened I think in May. Like I think it was a gradual reopening, like April, May. Was when schools started reopening for in-person learning, and they did like the similar precautions as like they're doing in the States now. And then for colleges though, they had the college students like in dorms, like they had to quarantine longer than everybody else in the city. So while everybody else was out and about, they were still like keeping the college students that were in dorms like in their dorms, which was like really crazy for me. And then they did online classes last semester, which learning Chinese online is very hard, to be honest. If it's a class, it was like webinar style, so it was super hard. I felt like I just couldn't learn. Like that's not how I learn, like my learning style wise. So that was interesting too. And yeah, like I was supposed to get a job in Shenzhen, and like the offer got pulled because of COVID. They just couldn't hire people. But I always say things work out for a reason, and I was meant to stay in Hangzhou, so it all works out. Everything worked out. But it's cool. And then like in Hangzhou too, for Chinese New Year, Chinese New Year is a very popular time to travel. So what Hangzhou did, not all the cities did this in China, but what Hangzhou did was they offered a stipend of 1,000 kwai if you stayed home during Chinese New Year. So several of us foreigners, we decided to to apply and take the stipend, and they gave us like 1,000 kwai like at the beginning of Chinese New Year, which was really cool to be able to apply for it because we paid into social insurance. So yeah, those are all the things I can think of that they did for the people here in China. But yeah, like at first, like COVID tests were at first free and paid for the government. Even quarantines were at first free and paid for by the government. And then after a while, they changed restrictions. So like, oh yeah, they closed the borders. They closed the borders March 28th last year. And then slowly they've started reopening to people who have like work visas and these different letters and things. So it's a slow process still, and it's always ever changing. But at first they were doing free quarantines by the government, and then it became like you have to pay for your quarantine. So yeah, those are everything. China was late in the game to shut down, and there's still borders are still shut down. Like you can't travel for tourism yet. And even students can't travel back for studying yet. They're right now only allowing, I think, people who work with work permits and also reunifications with like let's say foreign Chinese passports who want to reunify with their families here in China.
So that's sort of interesting. I guess it's like you mentioned, like a whole collective mentality versus we sort of even see it in the government in the US where states have some power over the federal government, and even within it, the counties and the cities have power over the state. So it isn't sort of stay at home mandates and mask mandates, and then it's just federal. States can block that, cities can block that. So it's more of just like a step ladder type of thing. Whereas it seems like in China, it was like all at once where it was all contained. Whereas here, it takes quite a bit longer because when you're shutting down, it's one by one, which takes a few months. And then even reopening, it'll do the same thing. Whereas, or where some states and some cities want to wait on reopening while some want to jump the gun on it, which has kind of made it a year long thing where like you're mentioning, China has basically started opening up when we sort of closed down. And yeah, we're still in that process of not completely opening yet, which is unfortunate.
And we opened quickly, but I think it was because of the collective mentality of the society of being like, stay at home, wear your mask.
So I guess it's interesting to see how different governments do try and manage a pandemic, right, that affected the entire world, and how like individual people do it.
Yeah, and you notice too, like the countries that have gone in lockdown in multiple times, and the countries that have had multiple lockdowns, or countries that have had longer periods of distance learning, and I noticed are actually like the Western countries with the individualistic mindsets.
Yeah, so it's pretty interesting just seeing different cultures. Like we're all human, right? And we all come from Earth. But it's just interesting seeing how we kind of adapt and kind of react to different occurrences that affect all of us, which is it is interesting to take a look at from like a broader perspective, and hopefully we get to speak to more people from different countries just to get that firsthand experience on what their country did, and how they personally experienced something that we can all relate to. So that'll be interesting, maybe talking to people in the future regarding that. Um, let's see. Yeah, so just to end it off, I just wanted one piece of advice from you. What would you give to students who are sort of trying to speak or find something that speaks to them? Maybe like some people are undeclared or they're not even sure if they should go to university because they don't have a specific field they want to major in. So what's like some advice you would give to those people?
I think for people who may be unsure, I think they need to really focus on finding things they like and finding things they enjoy. And you could find those things in social activities. So it could be anything from, like, for me, it was dance. For others, it may be other things like yoga. Maybe it's beer. Who knows? And I think from there, like, I think if you reframe the conversation of, let's not make it about what do you want to be. You're going to college should be something, instead of you're going to college to learn and then find something that you like doing. I think that will help reframe a lot of the college mindset, I think, for most people, and also like help people find their path too. So just find things that you like to do. Start exploring like your inner childhood. Like think about your inner child and think about like what you like doing as a kid and what you like doing in high school. And then from there, you kind of start writing down like the things you enjoy. Like maybe you were a captain of a team or something and you enjoyed doing, like you were a leader. So you could see like management maybe in something in the future, or maybe you were part of the school newspaper, you like taking pictures. I don't know, like there's so many things. Oh, you like fashion. There are people who like fashion. They want to go into fashion school, or maybe they like doing they love visuals and things. So I think just finding things you like doing, and then from there, it's easier to transition, I think, into a career. Is finding those things and then finding those skill sets that you can apply for jobs. And you can be flexible. You don't have to do the same job for the rest of your life. That's definitely, you could also, it's also, there's a really nice flexibility to career curves nowadays versus, like, I would say back then when my parents were going to school, it was always like, let's stay in a company for a long period of time, versus now it's like you can transition, and transitions are okay, which is cool.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Sabrina, for this great
Oh, of
advice.
course.
And I kind of want to like bring up, sort of like you said, connecting with alumni and staying connected with the school. So one website that we have to like a tool, there we go, to connect like students and alumni with each other. It's called the Titan Pro Network. And basically what it is sort of like a LinkedIn site, but it's specifically for Cal State Fullerton student, alum, and staff and faculty even. And basically it just allows us to find fellow Titans in industries that we want to go in, or Titans who are currently in that major, and just finding other people who can relate to our experiences or what we're trying to get into. So it's very simple to get on it. All you have to do is search Titan Pro Network and just sign in with your LinkedIn account. And with it, you just put in like your information and your CWID, and then it'll pull up what you majored in, what you graduated with. So everything is basically there for you. And then with it, like you mentioned prior, when you do meet some of these alumni who participate in these events, they're kind of professionals in the field willing to help other students out. So it's not like you're cold calling alumni. They put themselves out there for you to, like, for you to meet them. So that's what I love about that program and that tool. It's just super easy to get connected. And I know for this podcast, I use it quite a bit just to find alumni who are willing to speak to students and find out about events and just overall stay connected to Cal State Fullerton. Um, so yeah, if any student are listening to this and want to know how to connect with alumni better or other students, go ahead on Titan Pro Network, and you as well, Sabrina. Titan Pro Network is a great way just to stay connected and just find other people who knows, maybe they're trying to move to China or find a job in education or just learning a different language and just want your thoughts or advice or professional opinion on that. So yeah, it's a great tool and I recommend it to anyone.
Yeah. Sounds awesome. I'll definitely sign up.
So again, thank you
Yeah.
so much for joining us.
No, thank you.